Hello, everybody. It is Dr. Reverend Stuart Allen Swerdlow.
And Janet Diane Moya Swerdlow.
And this is the Expansions News Podcast for the middle of August 2018. Just another 2 weeks as the end of the summer.
Goes very quickly.
I don't know. I didn't enjoy it, did you?
I always enjoy summer.
Well, I didn't even go outside or anything.
I did.
You did?
I did.
I haven't left the house. Anyway.
That's your stuff.
Yeah, well, it's because you had the chain on my ankle.
No, I can't help that.
Couldn't get more than a few meters out of the basement.
Maybe you'll learn to be more clever.
Well, I sent those notes to the mailman through the window. Help, save me. Nothing. Anyway, something serious now. By now, all of you have seen the stories and the videos of the so-called hijacking or stealing, whatever you want to call it, of the Alaskan Airlines plane from Seattle, your homeland.
But you know, we don't hear much now in the news. What happened?
I wonder why it just dropped. What happens when there's a big story that drops off the news like it fell off the cliff? What that mean?
What?
It means they don't want people to know any more about it. That's what. And so, interestingly, and I actually have to inside laugh when I read this story, because U.S. aviation chiefs are struggling to work out how the ground crew worker who stole a plane at Seattle Airport last week carried out a series of, quote, incredible loops and stunts before crashing off the coast of Seattle. Flight experts are still investigating how 29-year-old Horizon Air, now Horizon Air is owned by Alaskan Airlines.
Right.
His name was, now this is important, Richard B. Russell. I'm going to get back to that in a moment. Richard B. Russell, and he stole a plane that was a Q400 turboprop aircraft and did these, what they call incredible maneuvers. Now, of course, there was an audio recording from the cockpit, but he spoke to the ground control and so on. And he explained that he picked up his flight knowledge from video games.
I don't think so.
Yeah, that reminds me of after 9/11 when they in the waiting room they found the how to fly a plane laying on the thing. I just happened to leave it on the chair, and they just read that before. Yeah, now I know how to hijack this plane.
And you know, the thing is that even the small plane is going to be a lot different than a big plane.
Well,
so the 9/11 people, they said, trained on the little planes.
The thing is, and here's another clue: 76 passenger, 13 right there. 29-year-old and 11.
In an 11-year.
So he said, according to the recording from the control tower, quote, "I've played video games before and I know what I'm doing a little bit. Oh boy, let's go get lollipops too." And then he crashed into Ketron Island. Now, you lived in Seattle, so
Never heard of it.
never heard of Ketron Island. Most people in the Northwest never heard of Ketron Island, and yet it's like this far from the coast.
Yeah.
And he goes on to say, because there was a pilot trying to guide him, he says, "Pilot guy, can this thing do a backflip, you think?" And he also tried to do a barrel roll, and he did it. Now, Horizon Air CEO Gary Beck said in a news conference that it did not appear Mr. Russell had a pilot's license, because he did not. And this left the airline confused about how he managed to fly for an hour before crashing. U.S. authorities have described Mr. Russell as suicidal. Well, how did they decide that? Because he said, I want to kill myself?
I don't know.
They really took a deep investigation to figure that out. And it goes on CNN, of course we can believe whatever they say, it said the FBI recovered human remains. Now, they said they recovered human remains, but they never really said whose. They didn't say it was him. They found human remains.
Right.
Maybe he crashed into a graveyard. And a black box, of course, they did find. Alaska Air CEO Brad Tilden told CNBC News, "I don't know how he achieved the experience that he did."
Well, that was, everybody was saying
but
that.
I'm going to explain all this at the end of the story, so just try to control yourself and contain your emotions. And Ryan Barclay, who is the founder and executive director of Flyaway Simulation, said, Yes, I believe that a civilian who has a thorough experience of flight simulation could indeed start, taxi, and take off an aircraft with no real-world pilot experience. Well, what fantasy world do you live in? Well, actually, he does live in a fantasy world in a simulator.
Well, not only that, but maybe that will help to sell his stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Rick Todd, who's the president of the National Association of Flight Instructors, said it's highly improbable, but not impossible, that he never had a lick of flying except other than the virtual world. Authorities are still investigating how he gained access to the aircraft. And according to the CNN aviation analyst, Justin, I love these analysts that they have at CNN. They call them experts. It's like the expert is, we give you a script to read and you say that, and makes you an expert.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then they put these glasses on them so it looks like they're smart, but they're really not. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he said, this is going to be a major learning event for the industry. This is a really big deal. Oh, let's go down to a candy store.
But you know, the weird thing is I don't even know how he could have taxied down the runway.
First, and that's the thing.
You're going to get to that?
Yes. Just, I said, calm yourself down, okay? Because, as you know, you said, how could he taxi and take off on an active runway with airliners waiting to take off?
Right.
But you go, out of my way, out of my way.
And nobody noticed that?
Really? And how could not crash into a jet taking off or landing or so on?
The air traffic controllers, there's no statement from the air traffic controllers about any of this.
And people are supposed to be watching the air, since 9/11, supposed to be watching the runways. They see a plane that's not authorized, that doesn't respond. They don't try to block it or stop it in some way.
But that's what I'm saying. There's no recordings from the air traffic controllers.
Listen, people.
Totally bizarro.
Here's what I'm going to tell you, and some of you may realize by now that I have sources.
Well, you keep telling them so if they don't realize it, then as you would say, they're pretty stupid.
Most of them pretty stupid. Yeah. So here's what my sources had to say, and I'm not supposed to name names, but this is what they told me I can say. The plane was empty. There is no way a guy who had no flight experience that could have flown that plane. There are pilots that have over 200 hours of flying a turboprop like that, and it would be impossible for them to do it. Plus, he was doing loops, and all the sources say the plane was flying via remote control. And it is also the understanding of my sources that the Q plane was on a covert operation to draw out some black hats, that's the Illuminati, that were stationed on those islands. It's a cabal base which coordinated the missile attack on June 9th and 10th. I'm going to get to that in a moment. There also is provided the Alliance assets in F-15 and F-16. I'll explain what the Alliance is. To excuse the fly over these islands. First of all, they were supposed to destroy Black Hat assets. The plane was supposed to crash into the compound there. That compound is owned by a single individual, which I'm gonna. This person who owns Kitron Island is someone that Trump once sued, and the guy is very shady. He's wanted by federal authorities for possible laundering of funds from Colombian cartels. And according to my sources, it's a truly bizarre story, and the deeper you dig, the weirder it gets. And also on that island is a mental hospital for children who've been abused.
Now, see, I never heard of that.
Yes, and just across from that island, now, this is a place where there's mentally ill children who've been abused. Next island over is a center for pedophiles.
Now, see, I never heard any of this, and I'm from
that
area.
I'm just telling you, this is something going on. And again, it's hard to imagine without training to fly that plane. A jet is easier than a turboprop. Did you know that?
No.
And a jet would be hard as well. What else does it say here from my sources? We're not going to know the whole story until it's disclosed in detail later on. Some of the details will come out that the Q plane was going after underground sub bases. Now, this is where I need to explain some things here.
You mean submarine bases?
Yeah, submarine. Now, go back to the guy's name. Richard B. Russell.
All right.
Well, there is a decommissioned or deactivated missile submarine in Puget Sound near Seattle. And guess what the name of the submarine is? Richard B. Russell. The USS Richard B. Russell. What a coincidence. And not only that, that this was the area, as it says here from my notes, June 9th and 10th. Remember when Trump flew to Singapore to meet with Kim Jong-un?
Right.
While his plane was flying over the northwest area, a missile was seen launched from Puget Sound as an assassination attempt.
Well, they try to explain it away in a variety of other ways, I think.
Yes, they said it was a reflection of light. It was a helicopter. A helicopter's going like straight up with a trail.
Not gonna happen.
No. You know, so really they need new writers. Illuminati, you need new writers.
Yeah, but they've dropped the story.
They dropped the story because now people are saying, that doesn't make sense. And though when it starts to really, their story becomes ridiculous, they drop it. And so the other thing is, remember, I'm going to tell you that earthquake that happened in Alaska and the earthquake that happened in Indonesia. Okay, what I was told was there is something called the Alliance. The Alliance is the group of Q, which I'll explain in my September class. I can't do it on the air. It is connected to other groups on the earth who are against the Illuminati, and it is actually also connected to a group of non-earthly beings who are assisting them to remove the Illuminati. And that overall umbrella is called the Alliance. And you may recall, I think it was a week or two ago, I talked about the submarine, mysterious submarine off the coast of Hawaii. This was it. And the missile was stopped by the Alliance. And I'm going to get to about the earthquakes in a moment, because that has to do with it as well. Now, I want to go to Sweden. And you know, I do have an interest in Sweden, because I have family there, as you know. And
your name is Swedish.
My name is Swedish. Sverdlov means sword in the leaf in Swedish. And so Sweden, as you know, has a big problem with the immigrants. And many Swedes were horrified in 2017 when President Trump linked immigration to the rise in crime in Sweden. But now they agree with him. Because, you know, last week there were huge riots by these immigrants setting fire to cars, buildings, etc., that even the Prime Minister of Sweden said, "What are you doing?" Anyway, so because of the soaring crime rates, gang violence, complaints about education, pregnant mothers being turned away from maternity because the wards are over capacity with immigrants, there's a resentment in Sweden that is built with an influx of over 600,000 immigrants in the past 5 years. Now remember,
it's a lot for Sweden.
Sweden only has 8 million people, and 600,000 immigrants is a big percentage of that.
It is.
And so, there are growing public calls for tougher policies on crime and immigration, and the support has risen for Sweden Democrats, which is actually a Nazi group that wants to freeze immigration and hold a referendum on Sweden's membership in the EU. Remember, I told you, countries are going to drop out of the EU like flies. They're going to just drop off. The Sweden Democrats are on the rise with their agenda of anti-immigration. They are gaining right-wing populist and anti-establishment parties in other European countries, such as Italy, France, Germany, Poland, Hungary, Slovenia, and Austria. In fact, I don't have a link to it, but I just read just 5 minutes before the show here that Putin was in Austria meeting with a pro-Russian member of that government. They're all moving away from the EU. EU is dead. The Democrats in Sweden include a policy of total freeze on asylum seekers and accepting refugees only from Sweden's neighbors in the future, which would be Norway and Denmark, which are also...
Would fit in a little bit better with the population.
Well, I think they meant, foreign ones. And according to Nick Eilert, a political science at Södertörn University, he says, Sweden is going down a more right-wing path. It is almost impossible to avoid, according to some sort of influence, to a party with around 20% of the vote, and it says Trump was right after all. Now, here's the thing. In Sweden and Scandinavia and Iceland, there is a saying that says, always be yourself. Unless you can be a Viking, then always be a Viking. And we're going to see that happening now. I would not want to be an immigrant in Sweden. No. Now, you know how the Me Too movement talks about things that happened 40 years ago, 50 years ago? It's like, you know, what? You bring that up now?
Right.
Well, guess what?
What?
Newly discovered data from radioactive sheep. You know that sheep glow in the dark?
No, never heard of that one.
I want to eat lamb chops now. Provides strong evidence that a mysterious double flash detected 39 years ago. Let's talk about something that happened 39 years ago in a remote island was actually a nuclear explosion. The flash was observed by a U.S. Vela satellite orbiting above Earth in September 1979, and there was speculation it was produced from a nuclear weapon by Israel. And according to the international researchers and the Journal of Science and Global Security, they analyzed it previously, and unpublished reports showed that radiation testing at a U.S. lab of thyroid organs from sheep in southeastern Australia made their determination. Well, that explains how people in southeastern Australia behave.
Yeah, but I mean, this is another bizarro story. They're going to analyze sheep and
it
their
gets better.
thyroids.
The flash was located in an area of Marion and Prince Edward Islands, which is in the South Indian Ocean, halfway between Africa and Antarctica. And they said it was very likely to have been conducted by Israel with assistance from the apartheid regime in South Africa. The researchers conclude that iodine-131, which is an unstable radioactive form of the element iodine found in the thyroids of some Australian sheep, would be consistent with them having grazed in the path of a potential radioactive fallout plume.
Listen to me. How old are these sheep? This would, I mean, sheep only live a very few
Maybe
years.
they inherited it.
I don't know. It is
And
totally
also
bizarre.
the New Zealand Herald said that sheep in New Zealand were hit by rain 4 days after the flash.
I'm sorry.
Now, I'm sorry too, because I want you to understand something. I want you to look at the global map, and you see where South Africa is and Antarctica is. And Australia all the way over here, and New Zealand's all the way. There is no storm that went from that area all the way across to New Zealand. It's not freaking possible.
Plus the sheep. I mean, really.
You know, that is like what they're telling us in Houston, that there's sand from the Sahara over Houston. Not over Miami. It's not over New York. It just went west against the wind and dropped on Houston. Really? That's like saying, let's do loop-de-loops. We'll read a book and then fly the plane. Seriously, people. You can't believe this crap that's on the news. Trump is right. It's fake news. And researchers also said that the detection of hydroacoustical signal from underwater listening devices at the time is another evidence. Well, guess what? It occurred in the atmosphere, not in the water. Israel's ambassador to New Zealand said that it's simply a ridiculous assumption that does not hold water. That's really funny. But Knesset Speaker Avram Berg told a conference in 2013 that Israel has nuclear and chemical weapons. This is not a surprise, people. I heard this since the 1960s.
Yeah, but how they're trying to trace it around through sheep
No, they're
and
just
rain
trying to attack
and
Israel now.
underwater is
and
really ridiculous.
the thing is, back in the 1980s, when I was a fetus, basically, I was like, undeveloped fetus. Everyone knew then that South Africa and Israel were helping each other with nuclear testing. It's not news. But why pick on Israel and South Africa? Because guess what? France did this in the South Pacific for the 50s and 60s and 70s.
Still, like I said, it's a bizarre story.
It's a very bizarre story and quite ridiculous, especially how they're saying how the rain went from that area near Antarctica, near South Africa, I don't know, 10,000 kilometers. What rainstorm does that?
It starts with the sheep. Okay, these sheep are not 39
and it doesn't
years
even
old.
rain in that part
and
of
what would give them the
Australia.
idea to even examine the thyroids of sheep, and how did they get them from 39 years ago? It would not have passed down through their progeny.
Well, I said
for
that it
39.
was like undiscovered
Sorry.
research. Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of Israel,
Yeah.
Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte is making an official visit to Israel in September. The September 2nd to 5 trip will be the first by a Filipino leader since they established diplomatic relations in 1967. So he waited 51 years to say hello. The Prime Minister of Israel and Philippines will discuss issues of security and counterterrorism. Israel has been a key weapons supplier to the Philippines because the Philippines is fighting Islamic militants. And by the way, during the September class, I will show how, and I'm sorry if I offend people, but you know I do, how the Catholic Church created Islam in the 600s. I will show that. It's just, Islam is a creation of the Vatican. Duterte faced global condemnation in September of 2016 when he compared his crackdown on drugs to Adolf Hitler's genocide in World War II. Duterte later apologized to the Jewish community over his remarks, which he said were aimed at the critics who had likened him to a Nazi leader. His government also pointed out that the Philippines gave refuge to over 1,300 Jews during the Holocaust.
It's number 13.
Yes. Now, since Duterte took office, police have killed 4,354 drug suspects, with many others murdered by unknown killers. And rights groups allege the total dead in the campaign is more than 13,000. Woo, there's that 13 again.
Yeah, 1,300, 13,000.
So the Illuminati are not happy with that because he's killing off their drug dealers that they need. And here's the other thing about the Philippines. There's a connection. Why is he going to Israel now? Why are all of these things happening with Israel? The embassies moving and blah, blah, blah. Well, it's because there's a connection to the Second Coming. And the Philippines, remember last time I was there, which I think was 2014, I was shown on a map and it said that the Second Coming of Christ would be in the Philippines because it's shaped like a camel that he would ride. And
I looked at the map, I'd forgotten that. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it does kind of look like a camel. Yeah. Anyway, let's come back to the United States for a bit. Did you know that California has a super volcano which is discovered to have 240 cubic miles of semi-molten magma stewing, that's me, stewing underneath.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. Now, this is in the dormant Long Valley caldera, which has these 240 cubic miles of magma. It was the site of a supervolcano that exploded 767,000 years ago. 7613. Yeah. That eruption released 140 miles of volcanic material. How the heck did they know that from 700,000 years ago?
I bet
Who measured that?
They checked the sheep.
Yeah, they checked the sheep. But they're still flying up 140 miles in the air. Now, scientists began to monitor the area after 4 earthquakes in the 1980s shook the region and led to evidence of renewed volcanic unrest. But they say there's no, we don't think that it'll erupt. Except that the ground is moving up and down and it's starting to throw magma, but it won't erupt. And right. But California, guess what else is filling with magma? I already told you about Mount Diablo a long time ago. How about Mount Shasta, Mammoth Lakes, and the area in the Mojave? So if I were in California, I couldn't get up fast enough. Now, to Alaska. Remember, I mentioned earlier, Alaska's North Slope was hit by the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in that region, which was at a depth of 6 miles. State seismologists told the Anchorage Daily News that the earthquake was the biggest recorded in the North Slope ever. And there were several aftershocks that were felt all the way down to Metro Fairbanks. Now, according to my sources, and there are no fault lines in that area. You can look it up. According to my Q sources, this was an attack by the Alliance on deep underground bases there, and so was the quake in Bali. So we're going to see a lot of these things happening.
Very interesting information.
Yes, it is.
Speaking of plane crashes, now you mentioned the Seattle one. Interesting, I've talked to you about this before. People see it and then they repeat. Well, a husband crashed his own plane into his own home after he was arrested for domestic violence, which killed himself.
That wasn't too much of an overreaction.
No, he apparently was arrested for domestic violence and they released him. Then he got a plane, doesn't say whose plane it was, So he got the plane and he crashed. He was 47. That's an 11. He was arrested at 7:30 the night before. By 3 o'clock the next morning, he crashed into his own home, killed himself. But he was apparently aiming for his wife and child, and they were both
lovely man.
Yeah, this was in Utah, and the man's name was Dwayne Yode.
Yeah, but remember what we saw in the news this morning, that this woman who survived said, my husband was a wonderful man.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's 2 plane crashes, so I don't want to say this, but I wonder if there's going to be a third. So keep your eyes open. And then I know you've also talked a lot about Turkey and everything that's going on there.
Yes.
So I just wanted to briefly mention, did you know that Qatar had pledged $15 billion?
Yes. It's not going to help very much.
Of direct investments. Well, $15 billion is a lot. You don't think that's
they
gonna
should
help?
have given me a little bit of that.
Well, they're probably not going to, unfortunately. But anyway, they're not telling what those investments are. But Turkey is really making the rounds over there with Russia and a lot of other countries. So again, like what you're talking about, different alliances are being formed and developed over there.
Yes.
So we're going to see more and different things happening.
But the good news is that they're losing so much tourism that if you want to get a business class flight on Turkish Airlines, it's dirt cheap.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I love Turkey. I would go back in a heartbeat.
I like Turkey too, but now they're doing bad things to Americans.
Well, we got to wait for a while. Yeah. But we will go back. And then down in Venezuela. Now, we had talked before about the attempted coup of the Venezuelan government, correct?
With the drone.
Yeah. Well, now, apparently, Venezuela has pirates happening.
They have pirates?
They have pirates that are spreading fear across the Caribbean.
Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yep. Isn't that interesting?
Wow.
And I also have been talking to you about paranoia programming. Now, the Caribbean is a big vacation spot for people from South America and North America, and now you're going to have to be afraid to go there because of these pirates.
But what a deal you'll get on a hotel.
And also probably on a cruise ship. But apparently there are vessels that are sailing in the vicinity of Trinidad and Tobago.
We were there too.
It says they're now under threat of being the victims of piracy for the first time since the 1700s. And the new pirates are ratcheting up violence to the levels that have not been seen by mariners in the region since the time of Blackbeard.
Who are these pirates?
Since the time of Blackbeard.
Look.
Yes, and we know that's a programming trigger for people, right?
Well, plus I have the word sex in my receipt.
Yeah, I see it. It took me a long time to carve that in this morning before we came on.
And you carved it in other places and it really hurt.
Did you know there's a non-profit group called Oceans Beyond Piracy?
No.
See, they make up these groups, in my opinion. But this group, it's a non-profit group, Oceans Beyond Piracy, found that pirate attacks in the region have risen by 163% between 2016 and 2017.
Wow, in the Caribbean.
Yep, and they feel that as soon as the instability in Venezuela continues to escalate, that it will become even more frequent that we have pirates.
Remember that Trump wanted to invade Venezuela.
Yeah.
And I think that's still possible.
And apparently, they're saying that now these pirates are doing such things as dousing people with hot oil, hacking them with machetes, throwing them overboard, and their boats are stolen.
Well, who are they?
Okay, well, listen to this. It says, even though Venezuela has a coast guard, one anonymous Venezuelan port official said that Venezuelan Coast Guard officers are doing this.
Oh.
So
like
we'll
the
see.
Somalians in the Indian Ocean.
So we'll see what happens. So,
do you ever believe in the 21st century there'd be pirates?
Well, that's why I said, remember how we've talked about how they're repeating things, they're repeating history? Well, here we have
them. That's the truth.
So here's more history being repeated, and they're putting that in front of you. Blackbeard, 1700s, Pirates of the Caribbean, like the movie. Okay, so programming.
Ottoman Empire coming back, new Soviet Union.
There you go. Now, this was something you said you'd heard about. I had not heard about.
What?
There's a botanical drug, which to me sounds like an herb, which is called Kratom.
I have heard of it.
Which kind of reminded me of the island you spoke about called Kraton.
Ooh,
but this is Kratom. So anyway, this is apparently, it's an herb made from the dried leaves of the Mitragina speciosa tree.
What's your language?
Which is actually a member of the coffee family.
Oh, I might like it.
Which is native to Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm.
Now, apparently, this kratom is typically taken as a powder, which is packed into capsules or brewed into a tea. Mm-hmm. But they're claiming that this mitragynine has opioid-like effects. And so consumers are using it for a mood enhancer, and sometimes it's sold at like smoke shops, I guess.
And hence all the people walking around naked in the public.
Maybe. But anyway, it said that in recent years it's grown in popularity as a step-down treatment off of other opioids, as well as a natural alternative to certain prescription medications. Now, some people are claiming they're actually responsible for deaths in the U.S., this Kratom.
Yeah.
Even though it's been used, it says, for centuries in Southeast Asia and is related to the coffee plant. But the government is saying that now, of course, it needs to be regulated and taken off the market. So those who want it for chronic pain, anxiety, depression, opioid dependence, it reminds me of what happened with marijuana. So advocates claim that it's impossible to overdose on it, but they say if you take too much, the worst thing that can happen to you will lead to vomiting. So anyway, all this is a big thing now going on FDA, and apparently in November, FDA wanted to elevate it to the opioid stance, and so it's going back and forth. So I'm just bringing this forward.
It's like another ayahuasca thing.
Or maybe even marijuana. I'm not sure, and I'm not a fan of any of this stuff.
No.
Because I believe in working with your mind. But I looked up Kratom just out of curiosity where you could buy it. That's tea in Walmart. You can go to Walmart
Seriously?
and get Kratom, according to what I saw online. So anyway, it's just kind of interesting this now is a thing because I've never heard of it. So I don't know if you've heard of it or if you've used it. Let us know your thoughts.
So a kid can go and buy a bag of Kratom tea. But it couldn't buy a bottle of wine.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, it's all crazy to me. And speaking of, remember, this was related to the coffee family. Well, now, did you know that in California that they have something in effect? It's Proposition 65, which made it so that coffee had to be labeled saying it could cause cancer.
Oh, please! And then they tell you coffee it removes cancer.
Well, this is the thing, because this apparently happened in March of this last year. A Los Angeles Superior Court judge ruled that California state law required coffee to carry a cancer warning because according to this, coffee has a chemical called I'm going to have to learn to say all these things. Acrylamide, and it's a byproduct of the reaction between sugars and amino acids when heated, like roasting coffee, frying potato chips, or anything cooked at a high temperature. So now the coffee manufacturers and sellers all went crazy about it because apparently there are 900 substances known or suspected carcinogens. Among these, this one thing for coffee.
Everything causes cancer.
Now, this is also interesting because people who want the coffee exemption said it doesn't have to be labeled, because this would mean like on every cup of Starbucks coffee, it would say coffee causes cancer. They're saying that the World Health Organization, in a rare reversal from previous guidance, not only dropped coffee as possible cancer-causing, but recommends it as containing numerous health benefits, including protecting against some cancers.
Duh.
So, Raphael Metzger, who represents the Council for Education and Research on Toxics, says, quote, "The takeaway is that the state is proposing a rule contrary to its own scientific conclusion."
Yeah, because they're morons. It's
So,
California.
I found that extremely interesting about
I'm not surprised
California.
that it's in California.
And now going off-world and the alien presence, you know.
Okay.
Did you read about former NASA astronaut Leland Melvin, who said that he saw something, quote, curved, organic-looking, unquote, floating out of the payload bay during his time on the space shuttle Atlantis?
I heard something about
He
that.
told NASA about it, but NASA said it was ice.
Of course, everything is ice or a reflection of the sun.
And then it goes on to say it's unclear exactly what Melvin saw, but he does have degrees in both chemistry and materials science engineering.
He would know something was
I would think he could tell the difference between ice and something that
I think so.
Weird. But anyway, so they continue to deny it. And then this article goes on to say that in 2015, Apollo 14 veteran Edgar Mitchell said that he believed peacekeeping aliens visited Earth to prevent a nuclear war between Russia and the U.S.
Really?
He said
when was that?
They don't say when, they just said that, they said in 2015 he said it, but we don't have anything beyond that. And then we have a former Pentagon official, Luis Elizondo, who used to manage the Pentagon Advanced Aviation Threat Identification, also says that we may not be alone.
That means that she knows for sure.
Luis, I think, is a male. L-U-I-S.
Oh, Luis. Not Louise.
I said
Luis.
that, Luis.
Yeah.
He said, quote, "My personal belief is that there is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone," unquote. That was in December 2017, so that's fairly recent.
So that means that just telling you
Because they want this thing alive from people who
I don't know why they're so afraid to just say, yeah, we know blah, blah. And they, oh, well, there might be blah, and there could be this.
They want to make it so that people don't react in fear.
Just say it.
And then to keep everything, of course, alive about outer space, that there is a rare piece of spaceborne rubble containing a new mineral never before seen on Earth. Gold hunters in southern Russia found it.
Where?
Apparently it came from Uakit.
Who?
Someplace. It's a name for the Russian location where it was found. Uakit.
Okay, that sounds like an Eskimo name.
I don't know. They said that it's they named it after that, and it's called Uakitite.
Must be local tribal people.
But they looked at the meteorite with powerful microscopes, and they identified the Uakitite as tiny grains no bigger than 5 micrometers. Everything has to be very, very small.
Right.
So that's 25 times smaller than a fine grain of sand. And the new mineral is so tiny that scientists cannot piece together all its physical properties. So,
just like they can't piece together what happened in Seattle.
yeah. So all of this, again, is just a way to bring things forward. So I want to remind people that our September Spectacular is right around the corner, where you're going to be discussing about how...
It's around the corner? It's not here?
It's around the corner.
Oh, I thought it was going to be right here.
You're going to have to get up, leave, go out, drive around the corner.
I don't want to do that.
Okay, so here we are. September Spectacular, where you are going to be telling people how the Catholics...
That's just one thing.
Yes. How they...
created Islam.
And all kinds of interesting things, which we can't tell you here. You also talked about the Alliance and the Illuminati and the Q phenomenon.
But a lot of what I'm going to teach is about ancient, energetic material that, and I posted on my private forum today that you all can't see unless you're part of that I've tested it over the last 4 or 5 months, and wow, a lot of stuff has happened. It's like magic.
And I want to remind you, directly after that, we begin our new series of self-healing webinars based on this book, Affirmations for Self-Change. And I will tell you that we only have 20 spaces, and I know somebody just came through this morning as a registration.
No, we have a lot already filled up.
I think we only have about 5 or 6 spaces left. So if you're interested, there's a special price for members. So if you're a member of our site, please, and you want to be a participant, you're going to need to register immediately because you don't want to miss out. Okay, and then you're going to be in Tampa, right? You're going to be talking about the Templars.
Yes, but
yes.
There'll also be an investiture, and there'll be a seminar on a new piece of equipment for medical people.
Yeah. So if you're interested in hearing Stuart in Tampa, you need to maybe read these books. Stuart Says is good. His autobiography, Montauk Alien Connection, is good. And of course, Blue Blood, which is off-world history, and True World History, which is on-world history. And of course, we also do on and off-world simultaneous existence reports. So if you're interested in that kind of information, you might want to consider getting those kind of reports done. And in New Mexico, you're going to be there, the end of October?
Last weekend in October.
Yeah, Stargate to the Cosmos, so check that out.
Right.
And
I actually might do loops and barrel rolls.
Yeah, that's possible because you're very good at that. And then,
but that'll be on the floor when I do that.
January class, if you're interested in our Oversoul Mastermind group, and we will tell you that we will not be doing in-person consultations or phone consultations.
I am done.
And the only people who will have the ability to get those will be our Oversoul Mastermind group. Other than that, we will still do email consultations,
right.
and we will do...
I don't want to speak to you. I don't want to see you. I will just write to you.
Yeah, and we will be doing our written reports, such as the on and off-world simultaneous existence, programming scans, etc. But the only people who can have in-person and phone consultations with us will be our Oversoul Mastermind group. So,
and any alien being that comes.
So if you're interested in that, January class is what you need to take. Okay? Anything else you need to say?
Yes, but I can't now. It's too much.
All right, so we'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.